I'm legitimately not sure what was going through J.D. Vance's mind when he decided to jump into the Epstein debate, but more importantly, why he chose to jump in by saying something so tone-deaf on national television. Let's just pause for a moment. It's really not that hard to understand why this was a bad idea. And yet, here we are. What J.D. Vance said isn't just a gaffe. It's a huge indictment of his judgment and, frankly, a reflection of a broader issue within the administration he represents. Vance said, "It's really not that hard, and it's a huge indictment of Jacob Fry and, frankly, the entire far left that they made that their cause of the day, letting violent sex offenders stay on the streets of America. The president's just not going to go for that." Ah, yes. According to J.D. Vance, the left's cause of the day is letting sex offenders roam free. That is what he claims. Meanwhile, he stands in an administration that, for over a year, has been embroiled in a scandal covering up arguably the largest pedophile network in U.S. history. If Vance were any less self-aware, he wouldn't be able to see his own reflection in a mirror. This isn't even the first time he's demonstrated a disconnect from reality on issues of crime and justice. Let's unpack this. Vance's argument isn't just misguided, it's actively misleading. He is claiming that opposition to certain federal enforcement actions somehow translates into support for violent sex offenders. It's a false equivalency so extreme that it borders on absurd. And yet, this is the message being broadcast to millions of Americans. Now let's get specific. What does this administration actually do? What has it done in the past year regarding the Epstein files, which contain critical information on high-profile perpetrators, accomplices, and enablers? The truth is far more damning than any hyperbolic statement Vance could make. Imagine being part of an administration where the Attorney General publicly stated that the files were on her desk and ready to be released a year ago, but never actually released them. Where a swarm of right-wing influencers waved around fake binders, pretending to hold critical evidence while the actual files sat untouched. Where members of Congress, like Lauren Boebert, were summoned to the Situation Room to get them to remove their names from discharge petitions meant to push these files into public view. Where even staunchly loyal figures like Marjorie Taylor Greene eventually bailed out over the sheer scale of the cover-up. Let's not forget, the Department of Justice missed the disclosure deadline by more than 2 months, leaving millions of files unreleased. And in the files that did get released, victims' names were exposed, while co-conspirators' names remained hidden. Think about that. This is not incompetence. It is a deliberate effort to protect the powerful, to shield those with influence, and to control the narrative around one of the largest pedophile rings ever exposed in the United States. So when J.D. Vance comes on national television and claims the left is letting violent sex offenders stay on the streets, the absurdity is staggering. He might as well be claiming that the sun rises in the west. The reality is the opposite. This administration is actively protecting those very individuals he pretends to condemn, and that's where the real problem lies. Vance's statements are not just wrong, they are aggressively tone-deaf, showing a complete disconnect from reality and from the lived experiences of victims. Now, what was Vance trying to do here? Before he made the catastrophic blunder, his point seemed to be this: when Americans protest ICE agents, what they are allegedly doing is helping dangerous criminals stay free. That's the argument he was attempting to make. Only, here's the problem. If ICE were truly focused on targeting the worst of the worst, as was promised under the previous administration, then the tragic incidents that we've all seen, the shootings, the extrajudicial killings, wouldn't be happening. Instead, we are seeing ICE operations that are disproportionately affecting children, seniors, hardworking immigrants, and even American citizens. People like Renee Good and Alex Prey, who were not threats to anyone, were targeted by federal agents. And this is exactly why public protests and outrage occur. People are reacting to what is actually happening, not to some theoretical mission statement about going after rapists and murderers. J.D. Vance wants the public to believe that anyone opposing ICE is somehow supporting violent criminals. But when you look at the reality, the people being harmed by ICE and CBP operations are increasingly ordinary Americans. People who are, at most, engaged in civil disobedience, protesting policies they see as unjust. The federal government's response has not been to correct course. It has been to double down, creating a chilling effect on the citizenry. This is the classic fascist playbook. Use fear and the threat of violence to suppress dissent. Let's get granular. Just days ago, I debated News Nation host Katie Pavlich on this exact topic. During the discussion, we examined incidents like Renee Good allegedly attempting to drive her car in a manner perceived as threatening to ICE officers, and Alex Prey's involvement in protests where he engaged in minor acts of property damage. But here's the key point. Neither of these individuals deserved to die, yet federal agents escalated the situation to lethal force. The administration has framed these tragedies as evidence of the need for increased enforcement and has attempted to paint public opposition as support for violent criminals. But the evidence tells a very different story. These incidents are not outliers. They are symptomatic of an agency whose mandate has shifted from enforcing law in a targeted and proportionate manner to exerting political influence and control. Consider the context. The White House has consistently mismanaged the narrative around these agencies. It pretends that ICE is executing a professional law enforcement mission while ignoring or downplaying clear instances of abuse. When the public sees videos of American citizens being harmed, the credibility of any messaging about going after the worst of the worst evaporates. And the hypocrisy is staggering. This is the party that spent decades warning about the dangers of a tyrannical government. They warned about overreach, about federal agents infringing on personal freedoms, about a creeping authoritarianism that could target ordinary citizens. Yet now, the very same party is complicit in actions that mirror the very tyranny they claim to fear. Then there's the Epstein scandal, which sits at the heart of all of this. The promises made by this political faction were clear. Once in power, they would hold the criminal cabal of pedophiles accountable. And yet, what have we witnessed? The files remain largely sealed. Co-conspirators remain protected. Victims' identities have been exposed without justice being delivered. The administration, including figures like J.D. Vance, have shown no meaningful initiative to correct this. In fact, actions suggest the opposite, protecting powerful individuals and maintaining secrecy. Marjorie Taylor Greene provides a telling anecdote here. She described receiving a call from the president in September where she was yelled at for supporting the release of the Epstein files through a discharge petition. She tried to explain that the files needed to be released for accountability, and the president's response was chilling. "My friends will get hurt." That's the entire rationale. Political expediency and protection of the wealthy, powerful, and connected. So, for J.D. Vance to position himself as the defender of public safety while the administration actively shields high-profile criminals is not just tone-deaf. It is morally indefensible. It's the ultimate gaslighting. The American people are told that opposition to federal enforcement equates to support for criminals, even as the administration continues to protect some of the most egregious offenders in the nation. And the consequences are real. Americans are losing faith in federal law enforcement. The public sees a double standard, where enforcement agencies are weaponized to serve political ends rather than public safety. Ordinary citizens and immigrants alike are caught in the crossfire, while influential individuals are protected. The erosion of trust in government institutions is accelerating, and Vance's comments do nothing to repair it. They actively deepen the divide. This is not abstract or unsubstantiated. There are documented cases from this year showing that federal immigration enforcement actions have resulted in serious harm to people who were not posing imminent danger, and that investigations and accountability have been contentious and opaque. For example, in Minneapolis in January 2026, Renee Nicole Good, a 37-year-old American citizen and mother of 3, was fatally shot by an ICE agent during an enforcement operation. Video and reports sparked intense public debate about whether the use of deadly force was justified, and local officials rejected the federal government's narrative that she was an imminent threat. The Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension was initially part of the investigation, but state investigators were later cut out of access to evidence when the FBI took exclusive control of the federal inquiry, raising concerns about transparency and accountability. In related incidents from the same Operation Metro Surge enforcement activity, multiple shootings and use of force events occurred in Minneapolis, including other individuals being shot in the leg by federal agents. Investigations have also found that some ICE officers may have made false statements under oath about use of force incidents, and the Department of Homeland Security has acknowledged video evidence contradicting sworn testimony in at least one shooting case. At the same time, high-profile cases involving wealthy or connected individuals, including those connected to the Jeffrey Epstein network, remain unresolved or are shrouded in secrecy, leading many critics to argue that there are two standards, one for powerful figures and another for people with no political protection. This context shows that the public record does not simply reflect isolated or ambiguous events, but a pattern of controversial enforcement actions by ICE and other federal agencies that have harmed individuals not widely seen as imminent threats. At the same time, accountability mechanisms have been resisted or restricted by federal authorities, further fueling public distrust. In that light, J.D. Vance's simplistic framing, that opposition to certain ICE actions somehow equates to advocating for violent sex offenders, is an oversimplified soundbite that does not reflect the complex realities on the ground. It reduces a deeply controversial and widely scrutinized issue to a partisan talking point, ignoring established facts and ongoing investigations. Moreover, this kind of messaging contributes to a broader narrative problem in which political figures use emotionally charged but misleading rhetoric to shape public perception, even when that rhetoric does not align with the documented record of events and investigations. The broader lesson is clear. You cannot discuss public safety, law enforcement, and accountability in isolation. You cannot claim to protect Americans while simultaneously shielding the powerful from scrutiny. You cannot claim moral authority while engaging in or condoning extrajudicial killings. And you cannot accuse the left of failing to act against sex offenders when the files, the evidence, and the justice system itself have been manipulated to protect the same individuals. In conclusion, J.D. Vance might want to take a long, hard look in the mirror before issuing public statements about crime and justice. Because in this context, he is not an authority on moral or legal accountability. He is a participant in a system that is actively subverting it. The American people are watching. They see the inconsistencies. They see the failures. And they are responding with skepticism, anger, and calls for real accountability. Before you go, if you found this content illuminating and want to support independent media, make sure to subscribe. The subscribe button will be right here on the screen. And given the political environment today, where administrations can lean on social media platforms to suppress critical voices, signing up for my newsletter is the best way to stay directly informed. The link is right here. Signing up is free, though there's also an option for a paid subscription if you want to support this work and ensure independent analysis continues. The bottom line is this. J.D. Vance's statements are not just misinformed, they are emblematic of a systemic problem. The administration's handling of ICE, CBP, the Epstein files, and public accountability highlights the stark contrast between political messaging and reality. And until this disconnect is addressed, the American people will continue to see the hypocrisy, the injustice, and the failures of those in power.